A new project from the authors of Magicka and Gauntlet can already easily claim the title of Game of the Year. The popularity of Helldivers 2, which breaks new online records every day, speaks for itself. Of course, it will not be called by gaming journalists, but by ordinary players. After all, these games are made for them. Fun, teamwork, the desire to do good, cause love and bring democracy to the enemies of humanity are important here. There is no serious plot in Helldivers 2, there is no great protagonist on whose shoulders lies the salvation of the world. But the game does not need this at all. There are inhabitants of Super-Earth who love freedom and democracy, and there are enemies who oppose everything that the Super-Earths like. Fortunately, Super-Earth has a powerful army that roams space on warships and punishes with fire and sword everyone who is not like people and does not share their views. You are part of this army, one of millions of hellish marines, armed with the latest technology of the military-industrial complex and hardened in harsh battles against formidable enemies. The whole essence of the conflict, and in general, everything you need to know about the Helldivers universe and the player's place in it, is easily and quickly conveyed by the introductory video, made in the form of an advertisement for military service, offering to become part of the elite peacekeepers spreading democracy throughout the galaxy. If after this you don't want to join the ranks of Helldivers, then there's definitely something wrong with you. After this, the player undergoes a young fighter course, where he is given a basic set of knowledge about stratagems, weapons, opponents and some mechanics, and then is immediately sent to sow freedom and damage democracy. The authors promised a real battle map, where you can monitor the number of conquered planets and the state of sectors, which will change depending on the player's contribution to the common cause. This is a very interesting feature of the project, and the developers will definitely develop it, offering various events that will force the hellish paratroopers to abandon their work in one sector and urgently fly to defend another. What's happening right now? While players have been recapturing sectors from the Terminids since release, insidious authoritarian automatons have attacked the planets of superterrestrials, and players will have to defend new territories for 12 days. Each sector contains several planets at once, each of which has its own geographical and climatic features that can simplify or significantly complicate the campaign on it. Those same desert planets are often blanketed by sandstorms, which reduce visibility and cause energy weapons to overheat. More on that later. Mission locations are randomly generated each time, so every foray into enemy-controlled territory will be interesting. In addition to completing the main task destroying enemy buildings, establishing communications, launching an intercontinental ballistic missile, Super-Earth did not sign any conventions. Rescuing scientists. Each map has additional missions, the completion of which can help during battles with the enemy or exploration of locations. For example, paratroopers can activate a weapon and then load it with various types of projectiles from napalm to a mini-nuclear missile to show the enemy the error of his decision to fight against the infernal landing. Or launch a radar that will reveal all points on the map with hidden ammunition, additional weapons, materials for improving the battle cruiser and super credits, local game currency. At higher difficulty levels, additional firepower can greatly help evacuate the entire squad from the planet, when the radar will always be useful. The most important help in solving assigned combat missions for hellish paratroopers are the so-called stratagems beacons, with the help of which turrets, airstrikes, various equipment, and even railgun shots from a battle cruiser hanging in low orbit can be called onto the battlefield. You can take up to 4 stratagems with you on a mission into battle, and activating each one turns into a real mini-game that requires you to set a certain combination. In the heat of battle, it's quite easy to make a mistake with a combination and drop an SOS beacon instead of an airstrike, but this makes each confrontation with the enemy more intense. Well, since the stratagem behaves like a grenade, if it unsuccessfully bounces off the enemy's armor, then the Super-Earth ships will turn fire on the location of the paratroopers. The stratagem can even simply fall out of the hands of a hellish marine if he is knocked down by an enemy attack or a simple shock wave from an explosion that occurs next to him, which is why an airstrike can be called directly on himself. Helldivers 2's modest arsenal makes up for it with the functionality of every weapon type available to the Hellborn Marines. There is an energy gun that does not consume ammunition, but can burn cooling modules with intensive use. Its effectiveness is greatly reduced on hot planets, but in locations where the climate is close to Siberia, it is capable of mowing down entire cohorts of enemies. However, our observation showed that the most effective shotgun in the game is the Crusher. It is available almost immediately, deals astronomical damage, penetrates light armor, and also shoots over long distances. Along with the main weapon, you can also take a secondary weapon into battle, and then summon it using a stratagem. The game does not provide any universal choice, forcing you to adapt to almost every task individually. For example, if during a mission you have to face armored targets, then it is better to take a recoilless rifle or an autocannon, when an arc thrower that shoots lightning jumping between enemies is suitable for dealing with groups of enemies. Speaking of enemies, Democracy and Freedom in Helldivers 2 have two enemies automatons, which the game presented as socialists in one of its commercials, and Terminid beetles. Moreover, both factions are so different from each other, offering completely different experiences, that EA would sell them separately as DLC, and Ubisoft would even release them in separate parts. The Arrowhead studio did such a good job on the opponents of the Hellish Landing. The beetles are literally overwhelming in numbers, overwhelming the paratroopers with meat and forcing them to try to organize a strong defense. The automatons are not as numerous as the Terminids, but unlike the beetles, they shoot back at the Hellish paratroopers, forcing them to constantly change their location and use cover. Although Helldivers 2 can be played in splendid isolation, it is highly undesirable to do so. The game is much more interesting when the tasks are carried out by a team of 4 paratroopers, turning the battlefield into a real hell with orbital strikes, air raids, and volleys of railguns and missiles. Even some types of weapons, like the same recoilless rifle, are much easier to use together. While one paratrooper plays the role of a shooter, the second helps him reload the weapon. Finally, you will never get tired of hearing the cries of "Taste democracy!" from comrades emptying clips at advancing enemies, or their maniacal laughter as they burn out bugs with a flamethrower. And it will be almost impossible to go beyond the 5th difficulty level alone due to the number and quality of enemies. And the higher the difficulty level, the more valuable the rewards for completing tasks. Some upgrades for your starship will be completely impossible to upgrade without resources, available only in the most difficult missions. The main and perhaps the only problem of Helldivers 2 since its launch has been the servers that cannot cope with the influx of players. At times, you will see a connection error message that takes longer than it takes to complete some missions. To be fair, Arrowhead increased the capacity of the servers a few days after the games were released, but the studio's connection problems have not yet been completely resolved. At the time of the review, the servers on PCs do not work as they should, allowing you to play only with friends. Helldivers 2 did not come with a season pass, and the developers promised to release 250,000 paid armor sets. The plot of Helldivers 2 does not relay the sick thoughts of scriptwriters activists trying to transfer the problems of the real world to virtual worlds. Helldivers 2 is a fun co-op shooter that's fun to play every time you play it. Huge variety of tactics. Friendly fire on makes you think twice about it, and not just pull the trigger at the first opportunity. Deep progression system. Procedural generation of locations makes each mission unique. Amazing satire and jokes that never get boring.